All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cool Beans Hot Stuff. This is Terrifying Tuesdays, my second Terrifying Tuesdays. Um, I don't think anybody is watching the stream except for Cutie Pie. Hey, Cutie Pie, hope you're enjoying your reading. If anybody else does pop on, thank you for watching. To those who watch this on YouTube, this is a new Twitch stream that I just started last week. This is only my second week streaming. And I started this stream, Cool Beans Hot Stuff, so I could take a couple hours every night to stream as I research really fun and interesting topics that I think are fun and interesting. And every day is a different topic. Every Tuesday is Terrifying Tuesdays, where I go over some kind of macabre, weird, freaky, scary, spooky, terrifying, obviously, aspect of the world, some stories, true stories, more or less. Some of them aren't as true. I got some Terrifying Tuesdays coming up that I'll leave to the viewers to decide if they're true or not. But a lot of times it's like a macabre or morbid fact about the world. That could definitely be a topic that we'll cover on Tuesdays. Like today. Today is a macabre and morbid fact of history. Today we are covering corpse medicine. All right, so have any of you heard of corpse medicine? I never heard of corpse medicine. This was something that I just kind of stumbled on the internet when I was researching creepy things that had happened throughout history. It turns out that doctors used to prescribe eating people and eating a whole lot of different body parts and doing a whole lot of different things with a whole lot of different body parts in order to cure a whole range of ailments. It was all very questionable, obviously. Nowadays, we know that none of it worked, but back then they were pretty damn certain. You sprain your ankle, you cut off someone else's ankle and rub it on there. Maybe not that, but it's very similar, right? A lot of different creepy, freaky things that they would do all over the world, as it turns out. Neither this is actually a thing that pretty much everybody did. So it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. Rest assured, your ancestors probably ate people. So you can go to sleep tonight knowing that fun fact. And yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to go over what corpse medicine is. Here, let me get my handy dandy note card so I'm all professional for you guys. So we're going to go over what is corpse medicine. We're going to go over the history of corpse medicine, where it took place around the world, which is virtually everywhere from my findings, but definitely more so in other places. Then we're going to go over a whole host of different medicines that you would have ran into in the old days. All different kinds of corpse medicines and what they use them for. And then I will put a disclaimer. That's what I got written on the. I'll just throw the disclaimer out now. This is not medical advice. Do not do this. Do not cut off somebody else's body part and rub it on your own. That's weird. People tend to look down on that. So yeah, disclaimer. I am not a doctor. Do not do anything I say. Okay, and with that disclaimer out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into what is corpse medicine. First, I have up here pulled up a very fun YouTube video. This is from a channel called Under the Knife. I had never heard of them until I started researching a little bit more on corpse medicine. They're a pretty fun channel, though. Whoever this lady is, she's got a pretty entertaining channel. Covers a lot of macabre stuff like corpse medicine. I imagine we'll probably be returning to this channel every other, Tuesday. On Tuesdays, we'll probably be hopping back onto this channel occasionally whenever she has a video that lines up with whatever I'm doing. So check out that channel if you like this kinds of stuff. We're going to watch her brief intro. She gives a really good intro on what corpse medicine is. So let's listen to it.
Welcome back to Under the Knife. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about
corpse medicine.
Excuse me. We'll be talking about corpse medicine.
Okay, aside from that joke, her channel's pretty funny. That one was a little bit lame in my opinion. The rest of what she does is pretty hilarious. I love her set pieces, though. The set pieces are really, really good. And she's a really good presenter.
past, people believed that the corpse retained power or vitality after dying. The dead took on a life of their own, and when consumed, could cure the sick. Even Leonardo da Vinci believed in the powers of corpse medicine, proclaiming, "We preserve our life with the death of others. In a dead thing, insensate life remains, which, when it is reunited with the stomachs of the living, regains sensitive and intellectual life." Those whose lives were cut short prematurely were believed to be especially powerful with regards to their restorative powers. For instance, the hand of an executed
separately, she's talking about what they call the Hand of Glory. We're getting into that separately. I just wanted to throw her intro out there. It was a better intro than anything that I can make, so I figured I would steal it from her. Okay, and let's continue on. Let's talk a little bit about the corpse. So the history of corpse medicine, the corpse medicine. So you guys have a rough idea of what we're talking about now, okay? Let's go ahead and jump into it. This is a paper I found, Mixing Medicines, the Global Drug Trade in Early Modern Russia. So this is a bit of history lessons from this book. We find just such a fraught but movable relationship in early modern Russia regarding flesh-based medicines. There were a number of fleshy ingredients or ingredients extracted from flesh used in early modern medicine. One example is musk, extracted from the glands of a slaughtered musk deer and commonly used in medicines in the Islamic world and Western Europe. A widespread medicine based on flesh was theriac, a compound drug, the creation of which involved transforming the key ingredients of viper's flesh, then thought to be poisonous, into beneficial medicament. Oh, never heard that word before, medicament. This recipe originated in the ancient Middle East and can be found in medieval and early modern Western Europe, Islamic, Chinese, Japanese, and Tibetan texts. Early modern medicine even used human flesh, mumia, we'll get to that here in a minute, part of a category of medicines known as corpse medicine, was a powder most commonly created from desiccated human flesh from ancient Egyptian mummies, another African materia medica in vogue in Western Europe. Flesh-based medicines were a major part of treatments in the early modern global world, yet Russian documents show a distinct reluctance with regards to this specific category of materia medica. I believe materia medica is medicines from the flesh. So it that gives a little bit of insight into where this concept of using flesh as medicine came from. It was not very uncommon in a lot of older cultures, ancient cultures, to use animal fleshes and animal organs and such to cure specific ailments. Even nowadays, a lot of people, we don't, go killing a deer and rub its liver on you or nothing. We don't go making like powders out of it. Well, that's not true either. But yeah, nowadays we do absolutely eat specific organs from specific animals. Again, more scientifically, because they do have specific organs do have specific health benefits. Okay, there we go. If I'm going to read the rest of this for you, I'm going to have to get better at speaking. That's for sure. For example, I used to eat calf liver every day, about 13 grams of calf liver a day. When I first got on testosterone replacement therapy, that's a whole nother thing. We'll talk about that some other day, maybe on one of the mental health days. That would be interesting to get into, TRT for men. But I got on TRT years and years and years ago. And when I did, my first reaction to it was acne all down my back. Total back acne ridden. This isn't even the grossest thing you're going to hear today, so I have no shame telling you this. Yeah, I had really bad back acne, or what professionals call backne. And what really helped with the back acne was eating 13 grams of calf liver a day, because calf liver is really high in vitamin A. I forget the actual name of the vitamin itself, but it's a form of vitamin A. And it helps your skin. It really helps with what it does is it helps with creation of sebum, which, if we're going to get even grosser, is the white pus in acne, in a pimple. That's called sebum. And so when your body ingests a lot of this vitamin A, it has a less it doesn't make nearly as much sebum. Essentially, it doesn't produce as much. So, yeah, there is specific animal parts that do have specific health ramifications. Even nowadays, a lot of people still eat them. We have a little bit more science based on it nowadays. We don't just kill a fucking deer, pop its eyeball out, and eat it, and say this is going to give you good eyesight, Sonny Jim. We don't do that. So, anyways. Adamant XZ, thank you very much. I appreciate the compliment. I'm trying here. My second Tuesday here. So thank you for following, by the way, too, and I appreciate the comment. I think you're the first person to join since my cutie pie and her boyfriend. So happy to have you here. Hope you enjoy it. Or her boyfriend, my cutie pie and her brother. Her boyfriend's doing the stream. So yeah, anyways, we've had all different kinds of medicines, corpse medicines, or different kinds of animal-based medicines, and that stretches all through ancient history. That could be a place where the inspiration for actual corpse medicine came from. And we're going to dive a little bit into all the different areas of the world where that happened, right? Okay, so while epileptics of ancient Rome drank the blood of slain gladiators, the beverage found particular favor as a health tonic during the Renaissance. Okay, so out in ancient Rome, they were drinking the blood of gladiators. The blood was typically harvested from the freshly dead, but could also be taken from the living. Ooh. Such medicinal vampirism had no shortage of adherents. Marsilio Ficino, a highly respected 15th century Italian scholar and priest, said that elderly people hoping to regain the spring in their step should suck the blood of an adolescent who was clean, happy, temperate, and whose blood is excellent but perhaps a little excessive. Wow, that's just all 7 shades of creepy. That's creepy on multiple levels, am I right? Another popular remedy, sometimes attributed to Saint Albertus Magnus, involved distilling the blood of a healthy man as if it were rose water. The result was said to cure any disease of the body, and a small quantity restoreth them that have lost all their strength. According to one 1559 text, by the 1650s, there was a general belief that drinking fresh, hot blood from the recently deceased would cure epilepsy, as well as help with consumption. Meanwhile, dried and powdered blood was recommended for nosebleeds or sprinkled on wounds to stop bleeding. So, there you have it. Corpse medicine comes from all over the place. Here we have some instances in Italy and Rome. I'm going to scroll a little bit down. This particular article, this is a good article. This is from Lapels Quarterly. I don't know exactly what all they do, but they did have a really long, really detailed article on a brief history of medical cannibalism. We're not going to read all of it because I got a whole lot of articles set up for you guys. But I did want to go down here to the second to last paragraph. Barbarism, of course, is relative. Barbarous originally just meant anyone who wasn't Greek, a point Montag made in his essay on cannibalism when he compared the cannibalism of Brazil to the violence of the 16th century religious wars. But what many Europeans failed to grasp was that for Native Americans, cannibalism was eminently social and occurred only within a well-defined set of rituals. Far from being senseless violence, it was often found as part of mourning rituals meant to reintegrate the deceased into the tribe, as with the Wari of Brazil or among other tribes in Peru, Paraguay, and Venezuela. In many of these tribes, funerary cannibalism was part of a multi-day ceremony where even the youngest infants took some broth simmered with the flesh of the deceased as a means of incorporating the dead into the future life of the tribe. Burial in the cold, wet ground seemed as horrific to them as human stew does to us. Even among tribes practicing aggressive cannibalism, war captives were consumed as part of a religious ceremony that was sometimes preceded by months of special treatment as an honored guest. So there's a whole bunch more of cannibalism happening around the world. We have Brazil there, Native Americans. A little bit interesting, their form of medicinal cannibalism, which I would count it as medicinal. They did have, I guess it's not particularly being used as medicine, but more in like a spiritual health kind of sense, right? Has much more of a social aspect to it than the actual just pure medical from Europe. But then you have Peru, Paraguay, Venezuela all thrown in there. A lot of different areas of the world where cannibalism to one extent or another was practiced. So this idea of ingesting people to gain some sort of either health, mental, or spiritual effect from it is not new and is not unique to any specific culture. A lot of people do have this idea that cannibalism was like a very small thing that only happened amongst a very small group of people or very small demographics of people around the world, and that is not true. As a matter of fact, most of our ancestors practiced it. So, by the way, that's really cool, Adamant, that you're looking at getting a bachelor's in psychology. I wish I would have done something like that, gone to college and actually gotten a bachelor's in something useful like that. But that probably means that explains why you found me on a Monday when I was doing the mental health Mondays. Those would be fun days for you then. If you like psychology stuff, those are the days that I actually go over anything psychology related. I didn't study it in college, but I did end up doing a lot of reading on it, especially after I went to therapy and spent about 3 years in therapy. I think I went over that yesterday, but went over a whole bunch of different types of therapy and really loved it, really found it a really interesting topic. So yeah, Mondays is probably your day. Tuesdays, like today, I don't know how much learning about corpse medicine is going to help with that bachelor's degree of yours, but it is entertaining. Hopefully you like macabre stuff and want to stick around and check out Tuesdays. Okay, so continuing. Let's see, what did I have here? Oh, more history on ancient cannibalism. So this article was really nice. Oh no, wait, this wasn't that article. This was a really quick, easy article that gave us a couple different instances of it. And then we're going to dive into some actual specific treatments that they used back in the day. So that'll be interesting. That's the part that I'm excited for. We'll actually go over what kind of shit they ate and why did they eat it. But let's continue with the history of cannibalism. So ancient cannibalism. Many cultures practiced medicinal cannibalism. Although Western culture has erased most mention of this, other records date the practice to ancient China, Greece, India, the Roman Empire, and parts of the Middle East. So if you haven't gotten the point yet, the point that I'm making is it was all over the place, man. Claudius Galenus, for example, was a Greek physician born in the 2nd century who treated Roman gladiators. Galenus had a large influence on medical theory that carried through to the 17th century. He believed in the 4 bodily humors and the importance of keeping a healthy balance between a person's blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. So I guess those are the 4 bodily humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. That's interesting. That would be something that would be interesting to cover possibly in a future stream. And according to cannibalism, it made sense to him that healthy blood from a vigorous person could treat ailments in an unhealthy person. Galenus encouraged people with epilepsy or seizure disorders he assumed were epilepsy to attend gladiator events with a cup in hand so they could collect the warm blood flowing from the dying or wounded gladiator and gulp it down. We kind of read a little bit about that in the last article. The belief that healthy blood had restorative powers lasted well into the 1800s in places like Denmark, where crowds with cups attended executions in the hopes of leaving with a few sips of fresh, hot blood. Oof. Blood consumption was one of the many ways the bodies of executed prisoners fueled medicinal cannibalism. And on that note, we'll continue into cannibalism and convicts. So, in many European kingdoms, ruling monarchs didn't build penitentiaries, and they often exiled or executed convicts. Sorry, that was a burp. I'm getting better at hiding my bodily noises, though. So, like, here in a couple weeks, you guys will be like, that Tony, he doesn't burp, he doesn't fart, he doesn't make any kind of odd noises. Medicinal practitioners claimed the corpses of convicts hung, beheaded, or broken on the wheel. Many executed prisoners were healthy young men, and that suited medical cannibalism's purpose. The practice often operated on parallels, such as the flesh from a healthy person could cure skin diseases. Practitioners added human flesh and fat to salves and used them topically to treat wounds. We'll be reading more about that too later, unfortunately. A person could also consume flesh and fat medicines to help with pain from rheumatism. I ran into that word in a previous stream. I'm not sure if that means like rheumatoid arthritis is a form of rheumatism, maybe? I don't know. Anyways, followers of medical cannibalism believed that a fast and violent death preserved the corpse's energy and made it suitable for processing into treatments. The skull, in particular, was highly valuable. Followers removed the skull from the body, emptied, and then ground it into a powder that treated diseases of the head, such as nosebleeds. We'll be diving into that a little bit more as well. Another option was used was to use the skull as a planter to grow moss. They then collected the moss and added it to healing concoctions. We will also be diving into that. This is just giving up all my good stuff, this article is. I probably should have read it prior, or the entire thing prior to actually jumping into this. And then this goes into the end of the eating of the dead. There were several motivations for ending the popular practice of drinking blood and eating smoked flesh. Medicinal cannibalism always had critics, but not because the idea offended them. Rather, many naysayers simply didn't think the treatments worked. This was particularly evident during the Black Plague, when prevention recipes didn't stop the disease from spreading. One failed attempt to ward off the plague involved menstrual blood from a young virgin maiden. Oh, dang, I did not read that last time. That is horrible. Combined with other ingredients to form a cake. Oh, God, the sentence just gets worse with every word. That people wore on a string around their neck. Oh, that makes it a tad bit better. Okay, they didn't at least consume it. Oof. The cakes weren't effective. Well, no shit. And as many as 50% of Europeans died during the mid-1300s outbreak. In addition to centuries of failed recipes, medical practitioners also had their concerns about fraud, particularly involving powders and oils that were supposed to have come from excavated mummies. That's that mumia we've kind of touched on lightly. Apothecaries had long believed the black substance found on mummies was bitumen from the Red Sea that could be used to cure coughs, heal broken bones, or break fevers. Counterfeit mummies flooded the market, and practitioners became distrustful. So that's kind of how the practice ended, at least in Europe. I think it ended for various reasons, for different reasons all over the place, right? So it, pick a place in the world where it ended. Some places haven't technically ended it, but that's pretty few and far in between. Everybody ended it for a different reason. But that's just a little bit more history on where medical cannibalism came from. We have, Rome drinking blood from gladiators. We kind of went over that. In Europe kingdoms, people drinking the blood of convicts. And from there, it just kind of escalated as things tend to do. And we jumped in until we got to mumia. So this was kind of the standard of corpse medicine. If you look up corpse medicine, mumia is like one of the first ones that's going to pop up. Tons of information about it. But this is about mumia from, let's see, the Serpent's Pen, David Castleton's blog. We're going to read a little bit into this. I did want to jump into at least these different couple of sections. This is a very, very long article, though, this blog, and I'm not going to dive because, look at this. It just goes and goes and goes. It turns out there is so much info about eating mummies and powdering them. We're not going to dive into all this info because I have so many other quote unquote recipes or medicines that they use that I wanted to go over with you guys. So, and we have limited time. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and start right here, and we'll dive a little bit into it, and then we'll move on to, I got a video on mumia too, by the way. But anyways, let's continue. So one of the weirdest substances in medical history, a substance Europeans once slathered on rashes and wounds and gulped down in drinks, was known as mumia. The word mumia has a resonance of Egypt about it, and that was where this medicine came from. It was, simply put, produced by grinding up ancient Egyptian mummies and was credited with healing a staggering range of ailments. The European mania for mumia began in the early 1100s, and by the 16th century, it was one of the most common drugs in apothecary shops across the continent. Physicians, alchemists, and surgeons brimmed with praise for the substance. The philosopher and pioneering scientist Francis Bacon declared, "Mumia hath great force in staunching of blood." Robert Boyle, the father of modern chemistry, actually, believed mumia was one of the most useful medicines commended and given by our physicians for falls and bruises. Mumia, it was claimed, would heal sicknesses as diverse as coughs, pungent pains of the spleen, hysteria, diarrhea, inflammation of the body, and epilepsy, as well as aiding in childbirth. The French king Francois I took a pouch with him everywhere containing a mix of mumia and pulverized rhubarb. Francois feared no accident if he had a little of that in him, and asserted his weird concoction would deal with headaches, stomach upsets, and even fractured bones. That's crazy. Well, so even the kings were doing this stuff, right? Yeah, adamant. Yeah, you're technically right. I mean, it is kind of a related topic, right? Because yeah, it does kind of today especially is very heavily reliant on cultural beliefs, right? We're going to go over uh a whole bunch of different recipes, and they all kind of stem from like this one, right? This stems from a cultural belief, right? The whole thing with the gladiator blood, right? That's a cultural belief. And yeah, there, I imagine a lot of that goes into diagnosing people when it comes to the psychology aspect of it. So yeah, I guess you're totally right. You know, I don't know if you're a fan of creepy things too, but I'm a huge fan of anything that's like scary or creepy. And the same as I'm a huge fan of anything kind of psychology related. So that's why I definitely decided with Terrifying Tuesdays. But this does it is loosely related, you know. But I'm glad that you're learning new things with the stream too, though. That is the entire point of the stream, is that I can get 2 hours a night to bullshit, relax, chill, and research things that I find are interesting, because, you know, I want to learn new things too, right? You got to keep learning or else you're getting stale. If you're not moving forward, you're falling backward, kind of thing, right? So I hope you learned something new. And this is some interesting stuff here too. I don't know if you knew anything about this previously, but this is like the first time I've ever heard anything of corpse medicine. So brand new topic to me. But anyways, but Europeans weren't just content with making ointments from millennial old mummies or swallowing their powdered remnants in wine. The art world also sought mumia out. Painters prized a pigment made from the substance called mummy brown, a rich brown hue which fell between the shades of burnt and raw umber. Mummy, I don't know if that's meant to be amber or if umber is a color. I have no idea. I'm going to have to look into that. Mummy brown was said to be good for glazes, shadows, shading, and yes, flesh tones. Well, surprise, surprise. Mummy brown was popular among the Raphaelites and was available in London art shops as late as the 1960s. But how did the outlandish and revolting idea arise that ancient human flesh could soothe health problems? Was everybody always convinced of mumia's curative properties, and when did learned opinion start to doubt the drug's wholesomeness? Well, what well-known painters feature the macabre substance, and why did artists eventually stop dabbing the remains of priests and pharaohs onto their canvases? Yeah, that is interesting to wonder, right? Like, what paintings would have, you know, if there's any well-known paintings that have mumia, the mummy brown color in them, that would be kind of interesting to research and look into. If we have time at the end of the stream, I'll check that out. So read on to learn of paints made from pulverized French monarchs, of aristocratic parties at which mummies were unrolled before enraptured audiences, and of a mysterious life force some believed could be transferred from mummy to patient. Continue reading to find out why mumia critics condemned it as a diet of dismal vampirism, and how one compassionate painter even gave a solemn burial to a tube of mummy brown. Well, we're probably not going to read all that. I will tell you, I believe the compassionate painter was Shakespeare. Shakespeare actually wrote about mumia in one of his plays. I wish I remembered what play it was, but yeah. So this was pretty much, you know, this was widely known. This wasn't some freak fringe thing out in the corners, man. Everybody did this. The big dogs did this. You know, Francois did this, and everybody knows that fucking guy. All right, so did the obsession with mumia arise from translational blunders and scientific mistakes? I don't know. I did want to read this section though, because I was kind of interested to see how the fuck people suddenly just thought, oh, let's just fucking start rubbing mummies on our bruises, on our children's bruises. So yeah, let's take a look at this. The idea that mummies could be ground down into a cure-all drug is certainly a strange one. I agree. Though the ancient Egyptians were mummifying humans and animals as long ago as 3000 BC, mummified remains didn't become a feature of European medicine until the High Middle Ages. The craze for mumia seems to have at first evolved from a more innocent and somewhat less disgusting source, an interest in the medical properties of bitumen. Oh, we did kind of learn about that last article. Bitumen is a naturally occurring pitch-like mineral, a form of petroleum or asphalt that bubbled up from a few spots in the Near and Middle East. The Greeks and others in the ancient world believed bitumen had therapeutic qualities. Proclaimed as a treatment for conditions ranging from dysentery to toothache, bitumen, I don't even know if I'm saying that right, but bitumen, we're going to go with that, was extolled by such weighty authorities as the Roman historian and naturalist Pliny the Elder, that's quite a name, and the Greek physician Pedanius Oh, I don't know how to say that. I'm not even going to try. Arab and Persian doctors later used bitumen for ailments including cuts, bruises, bone fragments, stomach ulcers, and tuberculosis. During the Crusades, European soldiers learned of the drug's remarkable attributes, especially its efficacy in healing cuts and fractures. They carried this knowledge home, thereby making demand for bitumen soar. This, combined with the scarcity of the mineral, created a problem of supply. The few sites where the substance seeped from the earth, such as the mountain in Persia and the floor of the Dead Sea, were unable to satisfy the new European appetite for the medicine. So this looks like some natural bitumen collected from the shore of the Dead Seas right here. All right. People then began to search for alternative sources of this rare and increasingly costly mineral. The ancient Egyptians were known to have used bitumen as an embalming agent. They'd indeed implied it to their dead from the 12th dynasty onwards. That 12th dynasty, by the way, is 1991 to 802 BC, right? So that's a long time ago, man. The idea therefore arose that the commodity could be obtained by rifling ancient tombs and scraping the substance from their long dead tenants. Ah, see, that makes more sense. You know, sometimes you read a claim. This happens all the time when you read into like politics. Sometimes this happens. When you read into a particular view, sometimes you read certain people's views and they are just batshit crazy. But sometimes you can, if you unravel it, right, this would be something I'm sure that you would do as a psychologist, right? Adamant, is, you know, you would unravel why a specific person thinks what they think, and there is a logic to it. That logic may be wrong, but it didn't just come from a freaky place like, hey, look at this, it's a mummy, let's fucking eat it. You know, that's not what happened. They were looking for this bitumen thing, said, oh, well, they use bitumen to make these mummies, thus these mummies would have bitumen in it, thus it's not the mummy itself that is curing you, it is the bitumen. That's interesting. The Arab physician, historian, and philosopher, oh wow, that's quite a name. I'm going to butcher that. I'm not even going to try that. His last name is Baghdadi, though. Baghdadi. I like that. Baghdadi. Let's call this man Baghdadi. The Arab physician, historian, and philosopher, Baghdadi, bears much responsibility for popularizing this notion. Latif, well, that's his first name. I guess I can pronounce that part of it. Latif wrote of a substance that in the belly and the skull of these corpses is also found in great abundance called mummy. Mum or mumia, the Persian word for bitumen, is where the English word mummy comes from. Oh, holy shit. Wow, well, that makes a lot more sense. Although Latif stressed the term mummy usually denoted bitumen that had oozed from the ground, he added, the mummy found in the hollows of corpses in Egypt differs, but immaterially, from the nature of mineral mummy. And where any difficulty arises in procuring the latter, may be substituted in its stead. It seems Latif, however, confused the sludgy black liquid that occasionally seeps from embalmed corpses with the bitumen that Egyptians used as a preserving agent. In reality, the two are different substances. Well, shit, man, he was born in 1162, you know, you can't blame the poor fucking guy, right? He was just going with what he had. We'll continue the rest of this. We'll read the rest of this section of the article. Some European writers and translators made a rather different error. Instead of, like Latif, believing that mineral bitumen could be salvaged from ancient mummies, they thought the health-giving mumia was actually produced by the mummies themselves. Oh, okay, so this is where things start to get confused. The Italian translator Gerard of Cremona erroneously defined the Arabic word mumia as the substance found in the land where bodies were buried with aloes, by which the liquid of the dead mixed with aloes is transformed, and it is similar to marine pitch. In his translation of the 12th century Arab physicians Serapin the Younger, Simon Genesis, who died in 1303, wrote, mumia, this is the mumia of the sepulchres, with aloes and myrrh mixed with the liquid of the human body. According to Matthews Platerius, a teacher of the medical school in Salerno and author of the popular herbal manual Circa Instus, mumia is a spice found in the sepulchres of the dead. That is best, which is black, ill-smelling, shiny, and massive. So I butchered everybody's name in there. These guys, thank God, they're not around anymore because they would be upset. Sorry about that. I'm doing my best over here. Over time, these mistakes were compounded, with people coming to think of mumia as not just the hardened secretions of the corpse or its residues of bitumen, but as the dried embalmed flesh of the whole cadaver. Therefore, any ancient mummy, Egyptian mummy, could be ground down to make the in-demand drug. The fact that mumia in Arabic can mean both the kind of bitumen used medically and a bitumen embalmed body may have added to this confusion. Well, yeah, no shit. You think that definitely added to it? I mean, I would assume it did. The Italian surgeon Giovanni da Vigo described mumia as the flesh of a dead body which is embalmed and is hot and dry. It has virtue to heal over wounds and staunch blood. Such errors not surprisingly led to a scramble to acquire ancient Egyptian corpses. The age-old dead became a prized commodity. Let's take a look at how this gruesome trade manifested itself and how some mumia might not have been quite as ancient or authentic as those gulping it down or rubbing it on their wounds would have liked to believe. And I'll leave you to do that. You can do that on your own if you like. Just check out, I still don't know how to add links to streams. That would be nice. I need to figure out how to do that so I can just link all of my sources to the stream. So if any of you guys are interested in reading along, you can do that. I'll do some research into that tonight. And then maybe that might be worth. I do save all these. I can probably link all these on my YouTube channel too. Might be the way to do it. But anyways, yeah, the article is called Mumia: How Ground Egyptian Mummy Cured All Ailments and Painted Masterpieces by the Serpent's Pen blog, davidcastleton.net. So that's very interesting. That's how mummies came about. Pretty crazy stuff, right? So that's really interesting. It turns out people just weren't like, oh, let's just eat this fucking mummy. Like there is a legitimate, this is what I was kind of talking about, right? There is a legitimate logical train of thought there. Even if the logic was wrong, even if it didn't, they were wrong in their conclusions, they were trying to follow a train of thought that you can follow now and be like, okay, I understand why you guys thought that. You guys weren't just a bunch of weirdos who were like, oh, hey, what's this? Let me put it in my mouth, right? So anyways, that's where mumia comes from. This is a little bit more on the history of eating mummies. This comes from a YouTube channel, Abby Cox. Pretty decent-sized YouTube channel, 345,000 subscribers. We were just going to go over her intro, which I thought was pretty humorous. I didn't want to play the entire thing, not because the video isn't awesome, because the video is pretty dope. I did watch the whole thing earlier, and I highly recommend it. If you like macabre stuff, Adamant, if you ever get on YouTube and like this kind of stuff, this person's channel is actually pretty entertaining. Yeah, then we're going to dive into some different medicines. But I thought I'd just kind of play her intro, just so you guys can kind of get a rough idea of the history of eating mummies. We can add just a little bit more context to it before we move on to the next special treatment.
I've been starting a new supplement. I'm really excited to tell you about it.
Okay.
It's called Mumia.
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 It is just the most incredible supplement. It makes me feel like an actual god on this earth, like a full protector of the faith, divine right by God, doué mon droit, like coming down. And it is so good. I take it orally, I take it topically. Wow. I could have 50 more sons.
That is incredible. Can you take it, suppository?
Yeah, you can take it anyway.
Fantastic.
So long as your physician knows how to do it properly. So you've never heard of Mumia?
No.
No. Okay. It's actual Egyptian pharaohs.
Get the fuck out, what?
I am dead serious, bro.
Hi. So today I'm going to try to explain to you how the audacity of an inept interpreter, or two, or three, in the 12th and 14th.
That little skit, that was really one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to play her video. She's only got another minute here that will let her talk and add a little bit of context to what we're talking about. But I love that skit. That shit's just hilarious.
Centuries caused the widespread belief that Egyptian mummies were a fantastic cure-all medicine, how it was used, the ramifications of the mummy's popularity, and the eventual pushback, because, yeah, not everyone thought it was a good idea. Shocking, I know, right? But I am also going to try and explain it and justify it? Sorta? Look, you're just gonna have to hear me out. Stick around, it'll all make sense in the end, I promise. Originally, my goal for this video was just to discuss whether or not Victorians ate mummies, because man, do people on the internet love to perpetuate that idea. But what I uncovered was so stupid that I figured, well, what the hell? The truth is actually more interesting than that question alone. And the answer to that question is no, by the way. They didn't. It's a lot more complicated than that. Now, the practice of corpse medicine is ancient, and the consumption of mummies as medicine is just the most popular example that has also, been taken largely out of context. But it is not the only example. So, to begin, we might...
Okay. We're going to go ahead and get out of this, even though this video is funny. It fucking cracks me up. I get a kick out of this channel. If you like humor mixed with macabre stuff, you got to check out this Abby Cox lady. There's a reason she's got a pretty decent subscriber size, because she's just fucking hilarious. Anyway, yeah, before we move on, you're practicing your listening skills in English, huh? Is that because English is your second language? That's really cool. That my girlfriend is actually learning Spanish. Then Spanish isn't her second language. She's from Hawaii, so she knows all kinds of different languages. I don't know how to. I can't say thank you, goodbye. I don't know how to say I don't know how to speak this language in any other language. So I only know English. And even that I have a very tenuous grasp of. So, but that's really cool. Yeah, still though, I think, I don't know if there is a way to link web pages though. That still would be kind of nice for people if they did want to follow along, I know you can on YouTube. And since I do end up saving all these streams that I do, I post them on YouTube, and then I end up saving all of the web pages that I use. I got to figure out a way to link those in for people if they do want to read along. But still, that's really cool, man. That's interesting. That'd be interesting to know what your first language is, too, by the way. Okay, Chinese medical science and mellified man. So this is our second one, the mellified man. So you had mummies, right? People use mummies. They grind mummies up. They rub it on their bruise, on their cut. They drink it. They do this and then that and then the other thing, another thing. Oh, Portuguese. That's really dope. I actually did want to learn Portuguese. Portuguese is a Romance language, correct? So I did try learning French. And like I said, my girlfriend's learning Spanish. So yeah, Portuguese, I believe, is kind of, it isn't like if you know Spanish and you know Portuguese, because they're two separate languages. But if you do know Portuguese, doesn't it make it a little bit easier to understand Spanish and vice versa? Kind of like Italian and French. I know Italian and French is like that. If you know French, then you're going to know a little bit more. You don't know Italian, but you can understand Italian when it's spoken to you. You know what I mean? I was led to believe that Portuguese is similar to Spanish. Not that they're the same language, but if you understand one or you can fluently speak the other one, then you can understand what Spanish speakers are saying, even if you haven't learned it. But that's really cool. Portuguese, that's fucking awesome. That's a one that you don't usually hear often, especially in the States, So badass. That's dope for you, man. Man or girl. I say man, meaning unisex. So dude is another unisex one I use. So man or dude, that's awesome. Anyway, so yeah, mellified man, right? So we had the mummies, right? Everybody's throwing mummies on everything. You got a headache, eat a mummy. You got a nosebleed, drink a mummy. Now we're going to move on to another one that is, in my opinion, a little freakier, but is in the same vein, is the mellified man. So, a mellified man is a human corpse, steeped in honey and stored in it for 1,000 years. So, a corpse steeped in honey, stored in honey for 100 years, While the entire concept of a mellified man sounds cruel and incredible, it is recorded in Chinese medical records that men in the Middle East used to submit themselves to be mummified in this way, to make a healing concoction for people. This, however, happened around the end of their lives, so one hopes that the people who turned into mellified men had lived a full life without problems. So it was kind of a what's the word? A philanthropic thing to do, right? To give yourself up to be mummified, essentially, in honey, which is crazy. But this is mostly a Chinese thing. This is kind of like the Chinese version of the Europeans eating mummies. The whole process was about donating their body for the greater good. There's that philanthropic part of that, right? Usually the people who donated their bodies apparently did so around the age of 80. Though body donation is still considered a suitable choice today, this donation for modification involved more self-sacrifice and was tougher. I imagine it was pretty horrible. This is because the donor would stop eating normal food and go on a honey diet completely until they died. This was that is difficult. Wow, they would stop eating normal food and go on a honey diet. That is very difficult because the person had to live through the early stages of the mellification process. Oof. There is no doubt that honey is a wonder liquid. The golden substance is not just a sweetener, but is popular for its medicinal properties. Different schools of medicine used honey as a base for healing concoctions, such as a preservative. and a preservative. The viscosity of honey and its antibacterial properties make it a great preservative. The pH of honey is very acidic, which is unfavorable for bacterial growth. Therefore, it is not a surprise to find that Chinese and Arabic medicine used honey as a mummifying agent. This was not just limited to these two cultures either, as the benefit of honeys were commonly known. Even the Romans used honey to preserve meat for weeks. Wow, that's interesting. I never knew that. I fucking love honey. Honey is awesome. Honey is, aside from all the different properties of it, it's just badass. I love honey. There are excerpts in Chinese medicinal books from the 16th century and even earlier that focus on the body of a mellified man as a miraculous remedy. Got it. Parts of the mellified man were eaten as a rare medicine that was thought to have the power to heal difficult injuries. One could heal broken limbs or other severe wounds by eating the mellified man. I don't know about that. I like honey, but I like my honey with no men inside of it, or women, or anybody else. But the process of making a mellified man was a lengthy one. Maybe that is why it was also a highly expensive remedy. Even though you had to only eat a small amount of the mummy's flesh, the demand for such a remedy was also high, which drove the prices up further. So here's the process for making a mellified man. The creation of a mellified man was the result of a self-mummification process. This process was very difficult and started well before the person's death. It began with the candidates submitting themselves to the process in old age. The donors had to eat only honey, like we talked about, and would even bathe in honey. The bodies became so saturated with honey after a certain time that the donors would excrete only honey and even sweat honey instead of water. Wow. That's disturbing to some, I can't really put my finger on it why that's so disturbing, but it's disturbing. I don't know if that would be painful, but it's not good, that's for sure. Ultimately, the bodies would reach a point of oversaturation that would lead to their death. Oh, so yeah, it was definitely not good. At this point of death, their corpses would have an extremely high concentration of honey throughout. In the next phase, their dead bodies would be placed inside stone coffins filled with more honey. The date of storing them inside the coffins would be noted and marked. The coffins would rest for 100 years. After a gap of 100 years, the coffin would be opened and the mellified man would be used as a medicine. Wow. Tall stories are medicine. Let's read the rest of this. I do want to see how much of this do you think is actually true? Like, how much of this do you think actually cured disease? All right. The principal source for information on the mellified man was the Benkao Gong Mu, the Benkao Gong Mu, a 16th century Chinese medicinal text. However, the writer states that all accounts of this process are only hearsay, and there is no physical proof that the mellified man existed. Oh, well, that is a real fucking bummer, bros. Like, damn, I was not expecting that. Quite a twist, quite a bummer of a twist, right? That's like watching a movie and then at the end of the movie, the fucking actor wakes up and the whole thing was a dream. It's like, man, I feel robbed. However, the text does mention the recipe to create a mellified man, and this has led to speculation that if the recipe exists, the practice of such corpse medicine must have also existed. Besides this, harvesting corpses for medicinal purposes is not something unheard of. Ancient medicine frequently dealt with human corpses, and the possibility of the two concepts being interlinked with healing purposes cannot be dismissed. Moreover, the use of honey as medicine on its own and as an embalming liquid was a popular technique. The use of honey in the mummification process have been observed in several different ancient cultures. Instances of corpses being administered as medicine have also been observed. Physicians in different countries and different eras have been known to try using mummies as medicine. However, we already know this, right? Because we're fucking smart and shit now. However, this was typically done for a very rare disease. Moreover, the practice of using, well, that's not true. We know that also. They use that. They got a fucking sneeze. It sounds like them fuckers just drank a whole mummy. Moreover, the practice of using corpse medicine has obviously been discontinued with modern medicine. While medical science still needs corpses, today these are used for medical study rather than being drowned in honey and then eaten. Well, that is just a massive fucking bummer that it didn't really happen. I never thought I'd say that, right? That's a horrible thing to say on the internet. It's a bummer that guys didn't get embalmed alive in honey, but that just wasn't the twist I was expecting. I'm a little bit stunned. I'm a little bit saddened by that. But that's the mellified man. Okay, see, yeah, adamant. I hope I'm saying that right. But yeah, that's what I thought. I thought that if you understand it's easier to understand Spanish and learn it. Yeah, I thought that if you knew Portuguese, it's easier to understand it. But the accent, yeah. So actually, now that my girlfriend is learning Spanish, she has a lot of Spanish speaking friends, right? And she said that the differences from geographical locations, right? Spanish from Puerto Rico is very different than Spanish from South America, and Spanish from Mexico, and Spanish from here and there and there. And the accents is what really makes it different. It's not the words, it's the accent. In some cases, the accent is so wildly different that even as a Spanish speaker, other Spanish speakers are like, I don't know what that person just said. You know, that's interesting. Does Portuguese have anything like that, where there's such differences between accents and geographical locations that other Portuguese speakers have a hard time? Because that actually does happen with English, believe it or not. There is people like, I knew a guy named Mr. Spoon. I worked in a kitchen with a man named Mr. Spoon, I shit you not. And he was Creole from down south New Orleans, old school Creole. And he talked like Boomhauer from the TV show King of the Hills. He's like, "Ah, they're gone, they're gone." That's what he sounded like. And that was English. It was, and at first I was like, I don't even know what the fuck this guy's saying. Like, I don't even know what kind of language he's speaking. And my boss Santos, who was Puerto Rican, was like, he's speaking English. It's just, it's some sort of, god awful English from some part of the world that neither of us will probably ever visit. Funny enough, the more that we worked with him, the more we did actually learn how to speak his form of English. Like, we could at least understand what he was saying, even if we couldn't do it ourselves. But that does happen with English, where people's accents are so thick that you don't know what the fuck they're saying. A lot of it too is slang. Slang can really fuck you up in the English language. Sometimes you go to a different city and the slang there is so drastically different from what you're used to where you live that it just goes over your head. You're like, I know you're speaking English, but it might as well be its own language by now. So kind of interesting stuff, man. Language is pretty fucking cool. Like I said, I wish I would have learned other languages. Maybe once my baby gets real good at Spanish, she can teach me Spanish then. I would be more interested in learning Spanish with a cute girl teaching me how to speak it. So, all right. Between Horror and Hope, Gladiator's Blood as a Cure for Epileptics in Ancient Medicine. So this was just an article. I think I actually had to buy the article in order to read the whole thing. So all I got now is an abstract. But still, between the 1st and the 6th century, a single theological and several medical authors, reported on the consumption of gladiator's blood or liver to cure epileptics. This is kind of going back to what we already talked about, the drinking gladiator blood. Now we're going to kind of dive in to, let's see, we went over Mumia and the Mellified Man, and that ended up being quite a fucking bummer of a article. Now we're going to get into the science, or the medical science, behind drinking blood to cure ailments. And there's quite a few different ways that people did this. So it turns out everybody used to drink blood, almost everybody, So if you thought that, those Europeans rubbing that mummy all over themselves was weird, or them Chinese people eating their mummy dipped in honey was even weirder, trust me, it gets even weirder and weirder, man. It just keeps going and going. So the origins of the sacred or apoplectic properties of blood of a slain gladiator likely lie in Etruscan funeral rites. Etruscan, I wonder what that word means. Although the influence of this religious background faded during the Roman Republic, the magical use of gladiators' blood continued for centuries. After the prohibition of gladiatorial combat in about 400 AD, an executed individual, particularly had he been beheaded, became the legitimate successor to the gladiator. Occasional indications in early modern textbooks on medicine, as well as reports in the popular literature of the 19th and early 20th century, document the existence of this ancient magical practice until modern times. Spontaneous recovery of some forms of epilepsy may be responsible for the illusion of therapeutic effectiveness and for the confirming statements by physicians who have commented on this cure. So there's just a little rundown. Yeah. Used to drink gladiator blood for epilepsy, and once they outlawed gladiatorial combat, it moved to criminals who were being beheaded and killed. So, pretty interesting. Okay, so moving on to blood drinking in the Middle Ages. Okay, this gets poetic. Chill stone floors, hooded figures gliding wrath-like beneath high vaulting, faint bubbling murmur of red liquid, distilling through tubes and vessels amidst handwritten parchments. Here in medieval and Catholic Europe, no less a figure than St. Albertus Magnus, seen by some as the greatest scientist of his day, was said to have refined a most precious water. Distilled from the blood of a healthful man, this was believed to cure all inward diseases if drunk, to restore strength, and to preserve the body from all sickness. Was this vampiric elixir of life really distilled by St. Magnus himself? Though it may merely have been associated with him by those keen to boost its status, versions of it clearly did exist. Over in Oxford, the British scientist and sometime Franciscan friar Roger Bacon refers to certain wise men who have hinted at a medicine drawn from man's body. They affirm that in it there is a force and virtue which restores and increases the natural heat, a force indeed said to be like youth itself. Around the same time, the Spanish physician Arnold of Villanova had allegedly explained how to alchemize the fire of human blood. Given to one in the hour of death, this would cause the person to revive again, and quicketh so all the parts that it moveth the patient and very weak person, as if it were within an hour to speak and to dispose and utter his will. This elixir had temporarily, I don't know, like with that ancient, that old school English, I don't really know entirely what he was saying there, but it sounded kind of funny. This elixir had temporarily brought the noble Earl and Deputy of Paris out of a coma. And Arnold stresses that if old men also use of this fire every day in a little quantity, it maketh old age lusty. Well, I know what that means. And to continue in like estate a long time. And for that cause, this fire is named Elixir Vitae. Elixir Vitae, or the elixir of life. What are we to make of this? Closely associated with monks, saints, and esteemed medieval scientists, these elixirs had an emphatical Catholic status, and this surely was no accident. Here was a religious group which openly, habitually celebrated its eating and drinking of the body and blood of their god, under the domes and spires of Cologne, Paris, Oxford, Rome, and Madrid. For all their gorgeous robes, the Latin, their ethereal choirs, they were already cannibals and vampires. The very essence, the purest distillation of their beliefs, raised to the light in the Holy of Holies, was vampirism. That's interesting. That is in the Middle Ages. Now, vampire pope. We're going to come back to this in a minute. Yes, there is a vampire pope. We're going to move on to 17th century Britain. Hold on, give me 1 second. Okay, yeah, Adamant. That's exactly what I heard too, is that when it comes to other countries that speak Spanish, specifically, not necessarily Portuguese, but Spanish, it can be challenging to understand them just because of that accent, right? So that's interesting that Portuguese kind of has a similar thing. It sounds like with different meanings or the same words, but still different meanings. Yeah. So it does kind of sound like it has a similar thing. See, English has the same thing. I don't know how far along you are into learning English or learning to speak English, but that is one of the things I'm told from other people who learn English as their second language. That's one of the difficulties with English, is there's so much accents in English that change all the various words, and then the slang too. Slang is supposedly a thing with the English language that is very difficult because there's just so many ways to say a single word, and then it changes from place to place all around the country, which is pretty fucking crazy. But that's interesting. I didn't know anything about Portuguese, so that's cool. See, I'm learning something from you, and you're learning something from me, hopefully. So that's awesome, man. I appreciate you being in here and teaching me that. That's cool. Before we move on to 17th century Britain, I am going to give me more of my own little elixir of youth. This is just methylene blue mixed with strawberry flavoring from Walmart. Not as hip and cool as drinking blood, unfortunately. And probably less expensive, too. These things are like $1.50. I'm cutting right now, so whenever you're cutting weight, it really helps to have these things around. Give me a second. Okay. By the way, you're from Brazil. That's pretty cool. I've never been to Brazil. I've always wanted to go to South America. I heard Brazil is pretty fucking awesome. Um, I always wanted to try. I love trying different kinds of foods from different kinds of places. Me and my girlfriend are big foodies. We love to eat, man. I personally fucking love Spanish food, Mexican food. I don't know how closely related to Mexican food Brazilian food is, but I would always be very interested in trying it. But either way, that's really cool. From Brazil, that's exotic. I don't know if you're in the States right now, but if you are, I bet you get all the ladies, man. Like them Brazilian guys. Okay, 17th century Britain. One thing we are never taught about the first three Stuart kings is this. James I refused corpse medicine. Charles II made his own corpse medicine, and Charles I was made into corpse medicine. Oh, well, that's interesting. And this last case, taking place within seconds of the beheading of Charles on the 30th of January, 1649, involved blood. Oof. I'm getting good at catching those burps, man. I'm a pro burp catcher now. One moment, Charles, mistaking a gesture of the headsman for a too hasty swing of the axe, was imperiously, commanding his killer to wait while he fully composed himself. The next, the executioner was selling tiny scraps of the king's hair along with parcels of blood-soaked sand strewn upon the chopping block. From demigod to commodity in a bare few seconds. Wow, that's morbidly poetic. That's the kind of stuff we like here on Terrifying Tuesdays. Later, one of Charles' royalist hagiographers, I don't know what a hagiographer is, but that's cool, claimed that some bystanders washed their hands in the royal blood, while others dipped their stabs in it, and they sold the chips of the block and the sands that were discolored with his blood and exposed his very hairs to sale. Some of these bystanders hoped that these would be as a means of cure for that disease which our English kings by their touch did usually heal, and it was reported that these relics failed not of the effect. I'm not sure what that sentence is getting at there. We'll just chalk it up to my lack of understanding of the English language. In the same year, the artist John Wieskop showed bystanders mopping up the royal blood in his painting an eyewitness representation of the execution of King Charles I. Interesting. Vampire chemistry, the lamp of life. Yeah, we'll dive into the lamp of life a little bit. We got about an hour left, so I got a whole bunch of crazy shit that people used to do. Oh, then we do want to get in Germanic countries and how they used to drink blood, Denmark and Sweden, all the blood drinkers over there. There's a whole long list of them. There is modern vampires. I did kind of want to dive into that too. This is a long article. We're not going to hit every single little bit of it, right, and just spend the rest of the stream on the blood drinking. But I do want to dive a little bit into that. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, let me check and see where, because that we jump into. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, we get into that a little bit. Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's dive a little bit into this, the Lamp of Life. So this is kind of an interesting, what would be the word for this? A different version of the blood drinking. So, I have made the quintessence of man's blood, rectified and circulated, with the which I have done most wonderful cures. For if you give thereof 1 dram, it will restore those that lie at the point of death. I promise this is not me misreading. This is just how people used to speak in Europe. So said the journalist and sometime Paracelsian physician Daniel Border, writing around 1651, also adding that if you put a little of it into a hogshead of wine, it will purify it and preserve it a long time more than any other thing whatsoever. But something yet stranger was being done with human blood during this turbulent decade. Had we chanced into the nighttime laboratory of the sometime royal surgeon Christopher Irvine in the 1650s, we might have seen his face enameled in a curious reddish gold light. The wick yielding this vampiric glow runs down into a glass vessel thick with crimson cream, the lamp of life. Irvine explains, burneth so long as he liveth, of whose blood it is made, and expireth with him. If it burn clear and quietly, it sueth his condition to be such. If sparkling, dim, and cloudy, it sueth his griefs and languishes. Okay, so what does that mean? The lamp of life was closely associated with the chemist and Paracelsus Paracelsian. Ah, there we go. Paracelsian. Learn a new word. I still don't know what it means, but Paracelsian John Ernest Burgavius, who described it in 1611. Did Irvine or anyone else ever actually light this fabled lamp? Here, as with so many other improbable medical questions, I am indebted to Steve Skolsman of Harvard Medical School. Having wondered vaguely if one might just drop a wick into a tube of human blood, not unlike the oil lamp I have in my sitting room, I was cruelly thwarted by the blunt facts of biochemistry. Blood, I was told, is composed mainly of water. Still, it is just possible that Irvine's lamp offers us an origin of the enduring phrase, snuffed it. Ah, so that might be where the term snuffed it comes from. Basically, it didn't do a good job of explaining the lamp of life, but essentially, because it did it in like old school 1650s English, right? And that's never the appropriate way to explain any things to anybody nowadays. The lamp of life is a lamp that has your blood in it. You would pour your blood in it, stick a wick in it, light it, and it uses your blood as a source of fuel, kind of like oil, which is improbable, as they're saying in this last paragraph. It's improbable that your blood doesn't burn that way. But back in the days, they said it did. And if the flame was clear and it burned nice and clear and crisp, then you were in good health. But if at any point you got sick, that flame would burn darker. It would be cruddier, cloudy, nasty. And that's how you knew you were sick. Like this lamp could kind of tell you where you were heading, right? If you were about to get sick, your blood in the lamp would be sick and your flame out of the lamp of life would burn not so cool, not so awesomely. It would be kind of shitty. So very interesting, right? So we're going to move on to executions, Germanic countries. Touring Vienna in the winter of 1668 to 1669, the English traveler Edward Brown witnessed more than one execution. He first saw a woman beheaded sitting in a chair, the executioner striking off her head with a foreblow, and then a man executed after the same manner as soon as his head fell to the ground, while the body was in the chair. And even as the corpse was shooting jets of blood and steam into the frosty Viennese air, a man ran speedily with a pot in his hand and filling it with blood, yet spouting off of his neck. He presently drank it off and ran away. This he did, Brown adds, as a remedy against the falling sickness. What does this tell us? First, it seems that a woman's blood was not considered suitable medicine. Second, the man drank the blood and then ran. Surprisingly, this was probably not due to shame, fear of capture, or even desire to avoid paying the executioner. The payment had almost certainly been arranged beforehand, and in running away after he had gulped down the hot blood, the patient was following a standard medical prescription. I mean, I don't know how you can come to any of those conclusions just based off that one paragraph, but still, the point of this is to say that, yeah, in Germany, they also used to drink the blood of the execution, which is pretty crazy. I mean, again, they did that in Rome after the gladiators and continue to do that in other parts of the world. Oh, okay. So you already know how to speak English, right? Oh, yeah. See, the Texan accent, that can be a tough one to parcel out, man. That can be difficult. Texas, some of the Southern, like the Creole accent is a very difficult accent to understand. You know, I only speak English, been speaking it my whole life. That one was so hard to understand, man. So hard to pick up. Some of the thicker, more like urban accents, in like Los Angeles, when I lived in LA, they had people that had some really thick, for lack of a better term, I'd say like gangster accents. They had used heavy slang in their English, also very difficult to understand. But I definitely get you with the Texans, and speaking fast, right? If you're going at like Ben Shapiro pace, super hard to understand. I've actually tried to slow my reading down, right? Because I have a tendency to speak really, really fast. Not necessarily, not like the Ben Shapiro style, like I think I'm super smart, but mostly just because I read fast is what it is. I read really fast and my mouth is like trying really hard to keep up. But I can totally understand that though. But so I get you. That's good. Cool. So yeah, you speak like multiple languages. You got 5 different languages under your belt, man. You got to quit doing that. Leave some of them for us, man. Shit. That's awesome, dude. That's a valuable skill set. Okay. Jumping into, so the Germans, yeah, okay, we'll go over this next one. I think this is just like another case of people drinking blood, but, I'm going to humor them. On the 6th of June, 1755, in Dresden, a man named Johann Georg Weidemann Weidemann, probably that's Weidemann, right? It's German. So Weidemann took the blood cure and then ran away. In 1812, in Hanover, one Louis Strohmeyer, aged 8, we might note, 8 years old, was taken by the family servant to see a beheading. Wow, because that's what you do with your 8-year-olds back then, right? And observed how women dipped handkerchiefs in the decapitated malefactor's blood to use as a cure for epilepsy. The epileptics then ran off through the crowd and were supposed to keep running until they dropped. Meanwhile, after a beheading in the Baltic coastal town of Stralsund in 1814, 2 riders led a poor sick man, probably an epileptic, and filled a moderately large jug to the brim with the executed person's blood. After the invalid had drained the ghastly contents right to the bottom, he was bound fast between the horses with strong reins and pulled away at a breakneck gallop. Ooh, that sounds horrible. Comparing these accounts with Brown's, the basic logic of the blood cure becomes clearer. After drinking the blood, the patient must be made physically exhausted and as quickly as possible. Why? Blood, as Steve Scholzman kindly informs me, can cause iron toxicity when drunk, and iron toxicity can in turn cause muscle spasms, seizures, confusion, and death. Oh, well, see, that's a good reason for people to stop drinking blood if you needed one. Other than the fact that you're drinking human blood, right? That's a pretty good reason to stop in itself. Let's move on to Denmark and Sweden. See how they used to drink blood. What was their way of doing it? Did they drink blood and make you run fast behind a horse too? I feel like that's just torture. That's horrible. After the execution of an arsonist in Copenhagen, 1795, Mary Wollstonecraft, that's an interesting name, traveling on business in Denmark at the time, turned with disgust from the well-dressed women who were returning with their children from this sight. She seemed in the same letter no less revolted to hear of the 2 people who had drunk a glass of the criminal's blood as an infallible remedy for the apoplexy. I should be such a simple word to say. Apoplexy. That's it. Whew, that took a minute. Apoplexy. I was worried. I was about to get Anima in here to tell me what the fuck that word was. Yet when she spoke out against this horrible violation of nature, a Danish lady reproved me very severely, asking how I knew that it was not a cure for the disease. Given that lady here clearly means a woman of status, belief in blood cures was evidently not just for the masses in Denmark at this time. In 1823, the Danish storyteller Hans Christian Andersen saw a pitiful poor person made to drink by his superstitious parents a cup of the blood of an executed person in an attempt to cure him of his epilepsy. So we see a common thread here, right? For some reason, there is a distinct connection between drinking blood, and epilepsy. And that happened with the Romans and the gladiators. Maybe that's where it came from, and that specific piece of quote unquote information, or that belief, right? That cultural belief continued to inform various cultures throughout Europe, spreading all the way to Denmark and Sweden, which is pretty crazy. I don't know why else, but what other reason would they have for all these different European countries thinking, oh yeah, no, blood absolutely cures epilepsy? That's crazy. But we're seeing that was a pretty widespread belief. Writing in 1860, Horace Marriott tells of how, even in the present century, either in the island of Amak or, I don't know how to say that, Moen in Denmark, the epileptics stand around the scaffolds in crowds, cup in hand, ready to quaff the red blood as it flows from the still quivering body. Marriott is evidently speaking about an ongoing practice, and in 1870, Lucy Lloyd similarly states that in Denmark and Sweden, blood is invaluable for the treatment of a variety of disorders, if the culprit has granted the sick person leave to drink it while yet warm. So in Denmark and Sweden, that's pretty comparable to other parts of Europe where they drank criminals' blood, the blood of criminals, right? So I guess theirs wasn't particularly fancy, but just goes to show you the drinking blood was everywhere, man. It was just all the rage, right? It was like skinny jeans in the 2000s. Modern vampires. Partly because so many people were illiterate throughout the 19th century, it is not possible to mark any simple shift from religio-magical blood medicine to later versions. But something different certainly was going on in Europe and America in the late 19th century. Ooh, juicy. Okay, fancy the richest cream, warm with a tart sweetness and the healthy strength of the pure wine that gladdeneth the heart of man. It was draught simply delicious, sweeter than any concoction of the chemist, the confectioner, the winemaker. It was the very elixir of life itself. It is rosy life, warm and palpitating with the impulse of the warm heart's last palpitation. It is ruddy, vigorous, healthy life, not the essence, but the protoplasmic fluid itself. No other earthly draught can rival such crimson cream, and its strength spreads through the veins with the very rapidity of wine. So, writing in 1875, this anonymous American was in fact referring to a glass of fresh bullock's blood, consumed on a visit to Cincinnati slaughterhouse, a place where a kind of medicinal blood drinking was still practiced, by consumptives in particular, just as it was in the shambles of Paris around the same time. Oh. For in 1879, those suffering affections of the lungs, a general wasting away of the body, and other diseases could be found at the slaughterhouse of the La Villette in Paris, where every morning between the hours of 8 and 9 from 100 to 150 invalids present themselves to claim their matutinal glass of blood. With these patients being mainly female, any privileged maids or matrons of high degree would be taken to a special reception room where they could be seated along with attending relatives. Already well organized in that sense, the Blood Clinic of Paris also showed a certain broad nod toward scientific precision, given that a patient would take the life source of cow, sheep, pig, or bullock, depending on the particular condition. In the 1870s, around 200 people were said to be drinking blood regularly at the New York slaughterhouses. It was taken warm, usually straight from the neck of the dying animal. Interestingly, most of the clients were again women. As there was no charge for the blood, this may indicate that women were using it as an iron-rich substitute for meat. Oh, at this time, in poorer households, meat was often reserved solely for husbands, who themselves might eat it just once a week. In New York, one mother even took her baby, which was fed solely on animal blood. Tellingly, many New Yorkers echoed that Cincinnati journalist, insisting that this crimson cream tasted just like milk. So, well, there you have it. People in New York, throughout America, they had them in Cincinnati, drinking blood. And let's continue. But the bigger picture of modern medical vampirism is one which shatters the Enlightenment myth of progress into atoms. Bernie Sanders recently pointed out that since 1975, there has been a massive redistribution of wealth in this country, but in precisely the wrong direction. More than 50 trillion has been redistributed from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. And in 2018, Rose George showed that this kind of inequality, does this have anything to do with blood? I mean, it looks like, okay, I'm not so sure that that particular paragraph did. It looks like it kind of later on weave it back in, but we don't need to go that far into it. Either way is to say that they were still drinking blood in America even as late as the 19th century, but it did happen to be blood of cows, pigs, bulls, what have you. Which I don't know how good or bad that actually is for you to be drinking bull's blood. I grew up on a cattle ranch, and I can tell you that we didn't do that at the time. Let's see. Okay. Oh, I did want to read this since we're on the topic of human blood. And if the idea of drinking raw blood turned a person's stomach, there was a 1679 recipe from a Franciscan apothecary for blood jam. In parts of Denmark, okay, that's all I wanted to read right there, was that they had blood jam in a Franciscan apothecary. I tried to look for you guys to find this recipe. I typed in every different combination I could of blood jam recipe, 1679 recipe, and all I get is blood sausage. That's the only, which we actually will be going over that, how to make your own blood sausage. I guess, yeah, using your own blood if you really, really want. But here in a couple weeks, I got a stream coming up of odd foods that they eat around the world, which should be a pretty fun stream to go over. Different foods, and one of those foods that's pretty actually common around the world is actually blood sausage, and there's various different names for it, but blood sausage and blood pudding is actually very, very common. It's all over Europe, and let's see, they do it in Europe. I know they do it in Hawaii. They do it over here in America in several different spots. Actually, I don't know. Adamant, if they do that in South America, do they have blood pudding and blood sausage down there in Brazil? Because it's a pretty common thing in a lot of countries. And, it's mostly, obviously, it's made with pig's blood. But, blood sausage is a thing. So, but I don't think anybody's... Oh, yeah, sure. No, I wouldn't doubt it that some people definitely still do some of these things. I would believe that, you definitely get, nowadays there's been this kind of resurgence that I've seen. Oh, thank you, Cutie Pie. Cutie Pie says in the Philippines, not Hawaii. Okay, there you go. The Philippines. That's where you get the blood sausage from. But it's still pretty good, right? I mean, Cutie Pie, you've talked to me multiple times about the blood sausage, right? You're like a huge blood pudding fan, or blood chocolate is the one you like. Yes, the Filipino restaurants in Hawaii. That's where they do the blood sausage and pig blood. Yeah, pig blood. And it's blood chocolate, right? Isn't that another name for it? Blood chocolate, I'm thinking. Something like that. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Cutie Pie. Cutie Pie for the win, everybody. But yeah, Adamant, I believe it too. Like, there's definitely people who still do some of this crazier shit. Nowadays, there's been this kind of resurgence of raw foods that people do. My little brother does this, where he, drinks raw milk and eats raw liver because for whatever reason, he believes that that's better for you. And I don't honestly know. I haven't done a whole lot of research myself, so I can't like shit on my little brother over that. My little brother is a very healthy dude. It is very surprising. But it's not my cup of tea, right? And I could see where, if people throughout time went to a point where like, okay, we need to have, milk and meat that's cooked, milk that is pasteurized. And now we're kind of slowly diving back into, well, maybe don't we need to do that? There's got to be places in the world where they either, one, just didn't get the hint that, wait, we probably shouldn't be drinking people's blood anymore. And then other people who might be thinking, when we did that, we were correct. So we should go back to that. I could see both those things being a thing, to be honest. Anyway, so yeah, blood jam. Again, blood jam is a little different than Cutie Pie's blood chocolate. Blood jam is made with human blood. If you do tune in or check out on YouTube, I'm trying to figure out what week is that I go over that. That's the last week. Storytelling, conspiracy theories, and animals. I think it's next week. I believe it's next Wednesday. I go over crazy different foods from all around the world. And in there will be all different kinds of recipes for blood sausage, blood pudding. And yes, I'll give up the twist. I actually do have a webpage that I found on how to make your own blood pudding with your own blood. So I will give you that recipe. Okay, and let's see. There were specific things I wanted to read from this article. I think we are still on blood drinkers. Let's see, where are we sitting time-wise? We got about 40 minutes left of the stream. And I got about, we got time. We got time. We can run into this. Because, this is some more interesting facts about blood drinking. 6, 3, and 8. Okay, so cannibal aristocrats and gentry. So, continuing with the drinking of the blood, Robert Boyle, the aristocrat who became known as the father of chemistry, distilled human blood into various treatments around this time, and would sometimes give these to a noble or genteel patient under a false name, lest they had qualms about swallowing blood. He claimed a near miraculous recovery in one case. While some of the nobility were therefore unwitting vampires, others were quite openly cannibalistic. A 1653 cure for epilepsy included a pennyweight of the powder of gold, 6 pennyweight of pearl, 6 pennyweight of amber, 6 pennyweight of coral, and 8 grains of bezoar, adding, also, you must put some powder of a dead man's skull. We will get to that here in a minute, the dead man's skull. But it goes to show that the drinking of the blood happens, everybody did that, even from the wealthy to the poor. We already went over medical vampires at public executions. I did want to dive a little bit into the vampire pope. So remember I said would we return to the vampire pope? Well, here he is. Here's the guy. That's him right there. He looks like a vampire, right? Okay. In July 1492, Pope Innocent, that's quite a name, Pope Innocent the 13th No, that's the 8th. Pope Innocent VIII lay dying. One of the alleged cures attempted at the innocent's deathbed is particularly memorable. 3 healthy youths were bribed by the Pope's physician with the promise of a ducat apiece. The youths were then cut and bled. All 3 presently bled to death. Ooh. The Pope drank their blood, still fresh and hot, in an attempt to revive his failing powers. The attempt was not successful. Well, that's a bummer, I guess, for him. Innocent himself also died soon after on July 25th. You know, it's probably a good thing. If you're willing to kill young boys and drink their blood, young kids and drink their blood to save yourself, yeah, it's probably a good thing that ended up not working, right? So runs the account of the Pope's contemporary Stefano Infusera. Infusera was a lawyer and a fierce critic of Innocent VIII. Can his claims be trusted? Contemporary evidence shows that Innocent's vampire cure seems to have been merely a more extreme version of a therapy recommended by others. Marsilio Ficino, for example, was one of the most highly respected figures of Renaissance Europe, and he too believed that the aged could rejuvenate themselves if they could suck the blood of an adolescent who was clean, happy, temperate, and whose blood is excellent but perhaps a little excessive. We kind of went over that, right? I think we actually read that exact quote. In 1777, when Thomas Mortimer claimed that towards the close of the 15th century, an idle opinion prevailed that the declining strength and vigor of an old people might be repaired by transfusing the blood of young persons. He adds that some drank the warm blood of young persons and that the practice was suppressed in France after some of the principal nobility turned raving mad as a result. So there's a vampire pope. Turns out that it's a little bit of a rumor. They don't know for sure. It was a dude that really didn't like him that kind of spread that rumor. That's a nasty rumor that you want to spread about somebody if you don't like them. But here's a person that did, drinking blood while we're on the subject of vampires, but bathed in blood. I don't know if y'all are formally introduced to Elizabeth Bathory. This is Elizabeth. Elizabeth, say hi. Hungarian Countess Elizabeth Bathory is thought to have murdered hundreds of young women in the early 17th century. So we're not going to go over too deep in her early life and such like that. I just kind of wanted to point out her crimes. Oh, okay. So in some cities, they do prepare pig's blood. Okay. The northeast region of Brazil. Interesting. Okay. See, yeah, that was something that I found when I was researching crazy foods around the world. Blood sausage is a very common one. And it turns out, I guess it's not that crazy. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember the Filipino dish, cutie pie. Yeah. Pig's blood. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, I remember you asking for it at the Filipino restaurant. They had it too. They just didn't have it that day because of Lent. But yeah, so, again, that goes to show we live in, I'm in Nashville. They have places that serve pig's blood. They have places that serve blood. The closest I've came to actually eating, I've had blood sausage, I believe. I've had blood sausage, and it tasted like regular sausage, to be honest with you. I didn't see anything particularly amazing or gross about it. It tasted like regular sausage. Maybe when you do it differently, it has a different taste to it. But I remember a big thing we used to do back in Wyoming, where I'm from, is bone marrow. You cook the bone until the marrow is kind of like a gelatin, and then you scrape that gelatin out onto a steak and spread it on a steak with butter, and you got your bone marrow butter on your steak, and that was really good. That tasted great. We get into some crazier ones though, for sure. So that'll be interesting. I wonder if there is any specific crazy foods. There's got to be at least one crazy food from Brazil, right? You guys got to have at least one like really out there food, because I know everybody does. I got 2 or 3 from the United States. I'll keep some of them secret, but just from where I'm from Wyoming, we eat bull testicles out there. Well, you got a bull, you just chop the testicles off, fry that shit in some oil, and boom, you got yourself a fucking fried bull testicle, man. We call them Rocky Mountain oysters. And they're good. They're good. If you can get over the fact that you're eating a testicle, they're pretty good. So Cutie Pie knows she ate bull testicles with me, so she probably doesn't want that out on the internet, but it's too late. That happened. I told the whole world you did it. And she thought it was good, though. Okay, before we dive into Elizabeth Bathory, though, I gotta pee really fast. So yeah, as soon as I said it, I knew you're gonna be like, oh, I can't believe you told the world I did that. You did it. It happened. But it was good, right? You liked it. It's not, it's not the first thing. Bull testicles is not the first thing you would pick to eat off of a bowl, for sure, for certain. But it was good enough, and it didn't hurt you. You didn't die. You might die from the embarrassment, though. It was interesting. It is interesting. It's different. That's for sure. It is. Okay, so I got to take a quick pee break. I'm going to move over to the Be Right Back screen, but it's going to be, just a couple minutes. I don't have to do anything else. Just take a quick pee, and I'll be right back, and we'll jump into Elizabeth Bathory, and then, I got a couple more really interesting, get out my face, a couple more interesting recipes for all you corpse medicine fans out there. So stay tuned. I'll be right back. All right. Testing. There we go. Okay. I'm back. All right. So let's read a little bit about Elizabeth Bathory. While we're on the subject of people drinking blood, we might as well. It's tangentially related, people who bathe in blood, right? So Bathory was accused of a haunting litany of crimes against both female servants and minor noblewomen who'd come to her for training and education. Most of her alleged assaults and murders took place after she was widowed in 1604. Some of Bathory's victims were covered with honey and left outside for the insects to devour. Ooh, that's a nasty one. That used to be an ancient torture technique. I kind of wanted to do a stream just on the really gruesome ancient torture techniques, because when you dive into like the Romans and then the medieval times, there were some really brutal ones, man. It would make for a good stream. But yeah, covering people with honey and letting insects eat them alive, I believe it used to be called boating. Or there was a form of it that was called boating. Anyways, during colder parts of the year, young women might be stripped naked and forced into deadly ice baths. Bathory sometimes tortured girls by driving needles into their fingers, cutting their noses off or lips, or whipping them with stinging nettles. She would bite shoulders and breasts, as well as burning the flesh, including the genitals. This is horrible. Gosh, didn't think it was going to get this deep into it. Okay, depictions. This is... we had to wade through all of that just to get to this. This is what I was really interested in. Depictions of Bathory often mention her bathing in the blood of virgin victims in an attempt to recapture her lost youth. However, this depraved action isn't backed up by contemporaneous witness accounts, which otherwise didn't shy away from gore. The first mentions of Bathory's bloodbaths came 100 years later after her death, and thus seem to be an invention. Ah, interesting. Another bummer. I suppose that's good. I mean, she still did a lot of very horrible things to these women, obviously. So she wasn't a good person. Look at that face. That's the face of a psycho for sure. That's that basic white girl, plain Jane, I'm going to bite your breast face right there. But yeah, she was a bit crazy. Oh, okay, hold on. Chicken's heart. Ah, yeah. see, okay, that's interesting. I can say I've never eaten a chicken's heart. All right, chicken's feet. I didn't eat. I never ate. I couldn't touch them. I mean, I couldn't stomach it personally. But my grandpa used to eat chicken's feet. That was a common thing. My grandpa, I guess it was an old school West thing. I had some thing out here in the South too. People apparently fucking love chicken's feet, but not chicken's heart. That's a new one. That's interesting. I have eaten elk's heart. Elk's heart was a big thing in Wyoming. When you kill an elk, eating his heart is a pretty common tradition. It's usually, I mean, I think it started with, I believe it or not, I believe it started with a lot of the Native American tribes in the area. Half of my family are Native Americans, and but that whole area that I grew up in was Native American land, and a lot of the traditions of Native Americans are still there, and a lot of the white people there, we adopt those traditions a lot of times, and eating an elk heart was one of them that kind of just became a tradition. So most of the guys that I know that went elk hunting when we were kids, it was pretty common to take the elk heart home and cook it, eat it, spice it up, and it was pretty good. It was tough though. It's tough. I don't know how chicken heart, because chickens, they gotta have a pretty small heart, right? Like that, like yay big, I don't know if that's a tough meat or not, but I can tell you elk heart is pretty tough. That's a pretty tough one to rip through. But chicken's heart definitely goes on the list. Yeah, so there you go. Okay. I would say I'd probably eat a chicken's heart. It's probably not as goofy as bull testicles, for certain. But it's up there, though, for sure. I love that shit. I think that's so cool. Like, every culture has got these interesting foods, interesting culinary inventions, and I think that's really fucking cool. So thanks for sharing that with me. That's awesome. Okay, so yeah, let's get away. We needed a little bit of a pick-me-up on the stream after all that Elizabeth Bathory nonsense, because that was really dirty. She did those girls dirty style. Okay, so going down to item number 4 is, I believe it said powdered skull. So moving on from the drinking of the blood, we got the eating of powdered human skulls. So powdered human skull formed another popular remedy. It was held to be a powerful cure for headaches. This originated in the homeopathic belief that like cures like. That's the belief. Like cures like. So if you have a headache, eat someone's skull. Makes sense, right? The remedy was brought into vogue by King Charles II of England. Exiled in France, Charles developed an interest in chemistry. He paid Jonathan Goddard, a famous surgeon and a professor of London's Gresham College, an enormous sum for the rights to the remedy, and frequently prepared it himself in his private laboratory. Made from the essence of powdered skull, the so-called King's Drops were said to cure headaches and promote vigor. Powdered human skull was the first thing Charles swallowed when he woke up and felt unwell on the morning of the 2nd of February, 1685, 4 days before he died. The pulped brain of a young man who had died a violent death was recommended as a brain cure by some European doctors. The pulped brain of a young man who died of a violent death. It had to be a violent death. That's unfortunate. And human fat was used as a remedy for... Oh, that's a new one. Jumping into another one. Yeah, let's see. Do I have any other info on human... fat? Yeah, okay, we have a couple slides on human fat. So, and we do go back to the actually the King's Drops is in the next slide. That's the powder skull that was aforementioned. 5 and 7. Okay, check this out. So moving on, cannibal monarchs. Here we go. So this is the King's Drops, I'm thinking. Yeah, okay. So here's something you never taught in school. Oh, this is the King Charles thing. Oh, look at that. James I refused corpse medicine. Charles II made his own corpse medicine, and Charles I was made into corpse medicine. Well, where have we heard that? Huh? A completely different article. Somebody here plagiarized, or AI wrote this. James was in fact unusual in his refusal, and it was somewhat unsurprising, as he was one of the most disgusting monarchs in British history. He never washed or changed his clothes, and was so fond of hunting that he would urinate in the saddle to save the trouble of dismounting. That is disgusting. Okay, we never killed elk like that in Wyoming. I just want to make that clear. That's not a normal thing to do when you're hunting. As for Charles I, his blood was mopped up with handkerchiefs by spectators after his beheading in 1649. We went over that. But the biggest player of all in the dark world of corpse medicine was Charles II. Charles reportedly paid 6,000 euros for the recipe for a spirit of skull, originally formulated by the eminent chemist Robert Goddard in the 1650s. This distillation now became so closely associated with Charles that it was known as the King's Drops. That was the powdered skull, and was in great demand amongst elite patients. One lady, Anne Dormer, drank them with chocolate against depression, and they were given to Queen Mary on her deathbed in 1694. Before that, they were the very first remedy Charles reached for on the 2nd of February 1685, a few days before he died. In France, decades before, the Emperor Francis I always carried mummy in his purse, fearing no accident if he had a little of that by him. We already read that. So there's your powdered skull. A little bit more on the history of human skulls. There's the chicken hearts. There's Adamant's chicken hearts, Cutie Pie. Okay, so that's a chicken heart, right? I got that. The image of the food I mentioned. So that's like, like the size of a tomato. Okay, that's not bad. I would eat that. I would absolutely try that. That actually looks good. That looks like a regular kebab, right? Have you ever eaten that, Adamant? Is that something you've tried before? I would give it a try. I don't know, Cutie Pie, would you give that a shot, chicken hearts? Is that your thing? It's kind of funny because it kind of fits into what we're talking about too, right? I think this is a little bit more morbid. Eating powdered human skulls definitely takes the cake. I don't think any of our weird foods from Hawaii, Wyoming, or Brazil beat what these folks back in London used to do back in the day. But it's kind of in the same vein though, so that's hilarious. All right. If you happen to chance, thanks for sending that, by the way. I was very curious to see what that looked like. So you would try almost anything. Yeah, I would too, though. I would try that for certain, just to see, right? Try it once, and if you like it, try it twice. If you happen to chance upon a human skull in the time of Charles II, you would probably feel great joy rather than great fear. A prized medical commodity, one single skull could be worth as much as 11 shillings, whilst an unskilled laborer might earn perhaps 10 pence a day. Shavings or powder of skull could be used against epilepsy and hemorrhoids, and the King's Drops against everything from depression down to miracle cures on the deathbed. The most highly valued skull was one with moss on it, as pictured on the cover of Mummies, Cannibals, and Vampires. That's a book that's very commonly, I think I had a link on it. If I don't, I'll link that book just for reference. If you really want to dive deep dive into medical cannibalism, corpse medicine, that's the book to go to. That's the book to reference. That's kind of like, from what I read, the be-all, end-all of the great dictionaries of corpse medicine. Anyways, this moss, the moss that grew on skulls, would be powdered and then used to stop bleeding, either on wounds or thrust up the nostrils against nosebleeds. Robert Boyle himself used it against a severe nosebleed one summer and swore that it worked, even when merely held in his hands. Interesting. Boyle's family were from Ireland, and so was the moss which he used. With no one left to bury the dead after the war crimes of English invaders, skeletons and skulls lay in green Irish fields for perhaps decades, and in some cases botanical moss grew on the skull. You could see these in London chemist shops around 1750 in the time of Dr. Johnson. As late as the 1770s, by the time Mad King George III was on the throne, there were still import and export duties on skulls brought from Ireland and later shipped into Germany. So there you have it. When it came to skull medicine, you could powder the skull, put it in a little vial, sprinkle it on your taters, or you could, I believe that's what the King Drops was the powdered skull, or you could eat the moss off of a skull or shove it up your nose if you had a nosebleed. I mean, at least it's going up the nose and not anywhere else, right? So I guess that's something to note. And then we're going to move right in from that to human fat. So how did they use human fat back in the days, huh? Let's see. We went over the cannibal aristocracy, This is the same human fat. Okay. On October 1601, the then Dutch city of Ostend was a few weeks into the longest siege in history. At one point, the Dutch lured a party of Spanish besiegers into a trap and slew them all. After rifling the corpses for valuables and arms, a few of the Dutch could also be seen dragging wobbling sacks back into the city. They contained human fat, swiftly plundered from the fresh corpses by surgeons. The reason for this was that human fat was a prime treatment against wounds and sores. Usually the chief source of fat at this time was the executioner. In France, Italy, and Northern Europe, he would either sell it to chemists or treat you himself. Executioners performed a surprising number of cures in this era, and in Germany, one of them, records Kathy Stewart, was supposed to have saved a limb given up for amputation. The bandages he used were almost certainly soaked in human fat. In Britain, in the time of Dr. Johnson, fat continued in use as other corpse medicine was attacked. It was used to treat rabies, gout, cancer, and arthritis. Some idea of its value comes from an incident in Norfolk in 1736. After a man and his wife had some words, the husband suddenly went out and hung himself. Oof, those must have been some nasty words. An inquest ruled that, as this was suicide, the man must be buried at the crossroads. But eschewing funeral or burial, his wife sent for a surgeon and sold the body for half a guinea. While the surgeon was carefully feeling about the body, the woman assured him, "He is fit for your purpose. He is fat as butter." Okay, so that's the idea of where the value of fat came from, is a woman nagging her husband into suicide. Oh, wow. So you can just go buy it at the butcher shop. That's crazy. And street food barbecue. Man, I bet that's delicious, though. I don't know why, but like street food, for some reason, is always like the most delicious. At least like Mexican, and then up here in the States, whenever you get like a good food truck, oh man, it's amazing. Yeah, that is crazy. Wow. Look at that. Chicken heart all over the place. Yeah. I mean, that sounds like it's fairly common. Yeah. Very common for chicken's heart to be found everywhere. Wow, that's crazy. I don't know why we don't eat that up here then, right? Because here in, it must be it's just a cultural thing, I guess. Because here in like the States, in Wyoming, chicken gizzards is very common. People eat chicken gizzards. And I'm led to believe that the gizzard is the pouch that the chicken swallows rocks into, right? That's what the gizzard is. It stops rocks from going into the stomach. I would eat a heart before I'd eat a gizzard. And gizzards are amazing. Fried chicken gizzards, I mean, they're chewy, like they're super chewy. They're like taffy chewy, which is a gross thing to say. But man, I mean, it tastes just like chicken, So it's like just a piece of chicken you just sit and chew on like jerky, really. Just hot, juicy jerky. I'm making it sound more disgusting, but it's not that bad, I promise you. But I would eat a chicken's heart way before I'd eat a chicken gizzard, right? You'd think like, what would you rather eat, the thing that just pumps blood through the body or the thing that they used to swallow fucking rocks into, right? You know what I'm saying? Assuming that's what a chicken gizzard is. I need to probably research that. What was I actually eating when I ate a chicken gizzard? Hold on, I gotta check that. The suspense is gonna kill me. Chicken gizzard. Chicken gizzards are small, meaty muscles from the digestive tract of the chicken. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, muscles found in the digestive tract. So you're essentially eating a chicken's throat when you eat a gizzard. So that's a little bit better than rubbing fat on your wounds, right? This does remind me when I read about this rubbing of human fat on you. I don't know if anybody has seen the movie Fight Club, but in that movie, Brad Pitt makes soap, and they go to the liposuction clinic to get the fat that they use to make soap out of. So they're selling, I believe the line in the movie is, we're selling rich women their own fat asses back to them, which is horrible, hilarious in a very horrible way. This is the same article. It's not. Human fat. Okay, I think we had another little bit in here about how they used human fat in back in the old days. Oh yeah, so 16th century executioners sold human fat for medicinal ointments. Ointments isn't as bad as the eating of human flesh, though, right? I think one is, it's still odd. I wouldn't be doing it anytime soon, but it's less disturbing than eating a skull, eating moss grown out of a skull, drinking blood. I think the worst by far is the mummies, eating mummies, and the mellified man. That's the worst one by far, in my opinion. The least appetizing. That and the drinking of the blood. Okay. In 16th century Europe, anyone suffering from arthritis, bone pain, toothache, or gout could trot down to their local pharmacy and pick themselves up a bottle of Exungia homonis, human fat, known colloquially as poor sinner's fat. It was typically harvested from the bodies of executed prisoners. Man, those prisoners just got turned into everything back in the days, right? They just lob their heads off, drink the blood, rub the fat on you. Since ancient times, humans and animal fat has been of great interest to physicians for its possible curative properties, but efforts to utilize fat in the production of medicine really took off in the 16th and 17th centuries across Europe, particularly in France and Germany. For executioners, this meant big business. They would harvest the human fat from freshly executed criminals and sell it to physicians and apothecaries by the pound. Until the mid-18th century, executioners in Germany would even administer their own homemade human fat concoctions. Precious fatty tissues didn't just come from executed prisoners, though. It was also harvested from fallen soldiers. After a bloody battle in the Siege of Ostend in 1601, Dutch surgeons swarmed the battlefield and set to work gathering as much fat as they could, which they then used to treat the other soldiers' wounds. Oof, that's rough. Watch your buddy die and then have them slice the fat off him and rub it on your own wound. Ooh. Oh, there it is right there. 2 apothecary vessels with the inscription Axon Hominis. Wow, crazy. Okay. Human fat was used for treating a variety of ailments, typically in the form of an ointment that was rubbed on the skin or in fat-soaked bandages. It was believed to be particularly effective at reducing scarring, healing wounds, reducing joint pain, and fostering the growth of nerves and tendons. The belief that human fat has healing properties was not merely entirely misguided. It is now known that fatty tissue can promote the growth of new blood vessels. In the early 1900s in Germany, human fat was still being used for wound disinfectant and surgical treatment of scars. And until the 1960s, human fat from placentas was used in anti-wrinkle creams. Whoa, that's pretty crazy. I would have never expected that. Eventually, the supply of human fat for use in medicine dwindled, as did the desire to use cream made from dead bodies. Yeah, well, that makes sense. We all grow up at some point, right? So that I do have to mention, that totally reminds me of, speaking of people, right? We were talking earlier, Adamant, about people that still believe in this kind of stuff. There is that conspiracy theory, which every Thursday I go over conspiracy theories. This would be a good one. Probably not next month because I already got all those streams lined up, but the month after, the conspiracy theory of rich people and, what's the dropper that they take? It's, adrenochrome. Supposedly very wealthy people harvest adrenochrome from people's bodies, dead bodies. They human traffic people so that they can harvest their adrenochrome and turn it into an ointment or a tincture for the purpose of, being more youthful, right? That's supposedly the conspiracy theory, is that's why folks like Brad Pitt, Jennifer Aniston are so youthful even in their 50s, is because they drink and or rub adrenochrome on their body. So you never know, man. We got a lot of that's just a conspiracy theory, kind of like it sounds like the vampire pope was a conspiracy theory. Maybe even Elizabeth Bathory, that could have been a conspiracy theory about her bathing in blood. So it might just fall into line with those sort of things, but you never know. Either way, though, the placenta thing reminded me of that. So here it is. Okay, this is what I thought. This right here is The Mummies, Cannibals, and Vampires. This is a book. Here, we'll just read a little bit. What is it? Udon Aiden Blogspot. This is somebody's blog about different books, but early modern corpse medicine. I recently read a book called Mummies, Cannibals, and Vampires by Richard Sugg. Despite its title, it's not about monsters. Instead, it's a history of what Sugg calls corpse medicine, the early modern practices of using bits of dead people in attempts to cure the living. Sugg can be a bit credulous in places, but he does a good job of establishing that human blood, fat, and bone saw fairly widespread use in both Europe folk remedies and academic medicines during the period, giving rise to a range of often gruesome medical practices that, in some cases, lingered on as late as the 19th century. So this is the book I was speaking of, Mummies, Cannibals, and Vampires by Richard Sugg. That's Sugg. If anybody is interested, either watching the live stream or on YouTube, if you're interested at reading more about corpse medicine, that's what you get. A couple fun facts from there. They cover skull moss, right? Plot seeds. Okay, that's something different. They cover the skull moss in there. This I thought was interesting. Strangulation boosts skull quality. If someone dies, this is according to this book supposedly, if someone dies by hanging or strangling, then at the moment of their death, their life force will obviously be trapped inside their head, unable to escape down into their lungs. This means they will die with a head full of supercharged brain juice, making their skull and any skull moss subsequently grown on it extra potent for medical purposes. There was consequently a brisk trade in the skulls of the hanged. Well, there you go. So you want a hanged skull then, not just any skull, a hanged or strangulated one. Subdermal talismans. We didn't read about this one. One particularly hardcore early modern soldier apparently wore a lump of skull moss under the skin of his own head. Oof. Presumably that can't be that can't be not good for you, but that's got a lot of germs involved there, right? That's not particularly sterile, I feel like. Presumably by cutting a flap of skin off of his forehead, pushing the moss under it, and then sewing up the wound and letting it heal. Probably the intention was to fortify his own skull with a double dose of life-giving brain juice. Apparently it worked too, protecting him against being injured by sword blows to the head. Well, I'm not going to try it, but all right. A wound salve. According to the early modern doctrines of sympathy, a connection existed between a wound and the weapon that caused it. Rubbing a wound salve made of human blood and fat and skull moss on a blood-stained weapon would make the wounds caused with it heal, no matter how remote the victim might be. Okay, so this is a bit, I mean, I guess it's not so much corpse medicine, but it kind of dives into the realm of odd medicines, right? If you got cut with the sword, rub fat, human blood, and skull moss on the blood-stained weapon, and it would heal the wounds. Okay, a cure for bad blood. To reconcile enemies, take blood from both of them and mix it with fertile soil. Then grow herbs from the soil and feed the herbs to both enemies. This mixing of their life forces will soften the enmity between them. Okay, so there you go. When you have family members that are fighting, just cut those fuckers, grow some herbs from their blood, and then feed it back to them, and now you got a happy family. Here we go. More about the lamp of life. Take a lamp, fill it with human blood drawn from one person, and then light it. The light from the lamp will reflect their condition. If it burns clear and bright, they're probably okay. But if the flame wavers, it means they're troubled. And if it goes out suddenly for no reason, it means they've died. Presumably, the lamp required periodic blood top-ups to renew its connection. Dead man's hands. One 17th century doctor recommended treating piles and swellings with the sweat of a dying man. This was obviously a pretty time-limited resource. If he's genuinely dying, you've only got so long before he tips over into being dead. But luckily, there was an alternative. You could rub them better with a dead man's hand. Presumably, he had a preserved one that he used for his purpose. I imagine it mounted on a stick for easier rubbing. Okay, well, use the hand of a dead man to rub your swelling, and there you go. No more swelling. Dude, that P. Diddy case is fucking crazy. I was actually thinking, I don't know what kind of stream I would do. Oh yeah, no, actually, if you're into conspiracy theories, at the end of the month, the last Thursday of the month, I got a whole stream plan, 2 hours of conspiracy theories that ended up being true. And there's some pretty wild ones on there for certain. Yeah, every Thursday I go over. Oh, I definitely knew what you meant though. Constipacy theory. I got you. I got you, bro. I knew what you meant. Yeah, no, there is definitely some conspiracy theories that are true. I think last week I went over dead internet theory, and that was kind of an interesting one because it wasn't necessarily that it's true, but it's becoming true more or less. It's kind of what the general consensus was, right? I think this Thursday, what do I go over? The Large Hadron Collider. The Large Hadron Collider has numerous conspiracy theories around it, including that we're in an alternate reality because of the first time it turned on, it zipped us into an alternate reality. It's creating a black hole. It opened a portal to hell, and they used it to discover the God particle, which has some interesting ramifications of that. So keep hitting the mic. Yeah, that would be an interesting one to cover. The celebrities with the adrenochrome would be a very interesting one to cover. And yeah, the thing about rich people is, man, is they have the money to make sure that the things they do stay covered up, right? And yeah, P. Diddy is a very good example of that. His case is insane, man. That shit's fucking crazy. You know, I mean, I didn't ever look too much into P. Diddy as a rapper or a producer or whatever. I didn't know a whole lot about him as a person or whatnot. So it did kind of blow my mind. But a lot of people that I knew who knew about P. Diddy were like, oh, nah, yeah, like that's totally believable. The dude had a really odd history. You know, I remember there was a video that came out a few years ago of him just flat out beating the holy crap out of his girlfriend on camera in a hotel. And so it was pretty unsettling. I mean, he went at her. And so it was kind of like, well, you know, okay, dude might be up to some shit then. Like I said, I didn't research a lot into Diddy. I don't know what kind of stream I'd put that on, but that would be interesting to just look into all the crazy shit he did, because every time I read about it, it gets more and more wild. So, but the adrenochrome conspiracy theory, I'm definitely going to do a stream on that. That would be a fucking blast to do a stream about. Okay, the executioner's other trade. I think this is the selling people the fat. Each human body was believed to possess a certain allocation of life. Oh, no. Okay. Yeah. Executioners cover this trade: bone, skin, blood, fat. Yeah. Okay. So we already went over that one. Oh, what did you do, mouse? That's okay. We'll run back through it. That was the executioner's other trade. Blood against age, the drinking of blood to remain young and healthy. We already went over that. We know all about it. We're practically experts on it at this point. A cure for flatulence. Oh, I'm excited about this. Tired of farting at inconvenient times? Well, who isn't? Try wearing gloves made of human skin. For some reason, they're good for the joints as well. Well, there you go. Oh, okay, yeah. Hey, Adamant, thank you very much for tuning in, man. I really appreciate it. We're actually about to wrap up the stream here too. It's been 2 hours for me, so I'm gonna go over some of the last few slides before we head out. But I appreciate you jumping in and sitting and chatting and joining, and yeah, man, being fun to talk to. I really appreciate you filling me in on Portuguese and chicken hearts, and good luck with the psychology degree, by the way. Hopefully I'll see you. You know, I don't know what you're doing tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be streaming our carnivorous plants. Every Wednesday is Wildlife Wednesdays, so where I cover some about wildlife. I don't know if you're interested in wildlife, but if you are, tomorrow will be Wildlife Wednesdays. We'll cover carnivorous plants. If you're not, though, because everybody's got different interests, that's just how it works. I know you did say you're interested in psychology. So next Monday, we're covering the 4 habits of Navy SEALs, which is an interesting topic. That doesn't sound like a psychological topic, but there is a psychologist named Dr. Eric Potterat who helped devise 4 methods that Navy SEALs use to get through Navy SEAL training. And by using these 4 methods, he increased the graduation rate of the Navy SEAls from 4% to 25%, which is a pretty high increase in graduation rates for what's considered one of the toughest military schools in the country. So if you're interested, I'm really excited about that stream. That might be something you're interested in. So if we don't see you tomorrow or Thursday or Friday, then maybe we'll see you Monday for more psychology-based stuff. But in the meantime, thank you very much for showing up on the stream. Thank you for your follow. I hope you had a lot of fun. It was fun. Good. I'm glad that it was fun. I hope you learned something. I had a lot of fun talking to you. It was nice to have some company here with me and my cutie pie while we're going over this stuff. So thanks again, man. You have a wonderful rest of your night, and hopefully I will see you later in the week. All right. Take it easy. But for everyone else, I'll keep on going. We got just a couple slides left before I go ahead and sign off. But yeah, while we're talking a cure for flatulence, that one got me, man. Wearing gloves made of human skin if you're tired of farting. So that was a thing, supposedly. I think out of everything that we've heard, and we've heard some pretty crazy things tonight, that's the craziest. That one right there. That one, that's just the most ridiculous. Oh, geez. And then we have Mumia. The Black Doctors. So, suspicion of the medical profession seems to have run deep in rural Scotland. These parents would warn their children of the Black Doctors, medical murderers who lurked around looking for potential victims. When they spotted a likely target, they'd sneak up behind them and slap a black adhesive patch over their nose and mouth, suffocating them and preventing them from calling out, then drag them off to make healing broth from their bodies and bones. Very similar stories circulated in early Victorian London, where medical murder gangs were rumored to garrote pedestrians and throw their bodies down through hidden hatches into ever-boiling cauldrons in the tunnels below. Ooh, geez. Well, that would be an interesting stream for a Terrifying Tuesdays about the Black Doctors and they had a name for them. Victorian medical murder gangs would be an interesting stream. So before we end the stream, I just wanted to go over, that was kind of my disclaimer, does corpse medicine work? And funny enough, I researched it and I couldn't just get a single actual medical article to say no, it doesn't. I couldn't find a single one that said that. But that's most likely probably because they feel like they probably shouldn't need to nowadays. Shouldn't need a doctor to tell you that wearing gloves made of human skin is not going to help with your farting issues, bro. Eat less broccoli, maybe. So we had to, let's refer to the AI on this one. Does corpse medicine work? No. Corpse medicine, the practice of using human remains for medicinal purposes, was based on misunderstandings and did not work in the way proponents believed. And by the 18th century, most physicians no longer believed it useful. The misunderstanding: Europeans mistakenly believed that the black sticky resin found on mummies held miraculous healing properties due to an incorrect translation of Persian medical texts that actually referred to natural mineral pitch. The practice, that's the mummy practice, the decline by the 18th century. Treating patients with mummies was in dramatic decline. Most physicians no longer believed it useful. The last recorded listing of mummy for sale in a medical catalog was in 1924, which is still pretty astounding. That was very recent comparative, to when they were doing it. But there's your answer. Should you go out and wear human gloves to control your farts? No, you should absolutely not. Please do not do that. Should you go find somebody's skull and grow moss on it and eat it when you get and shove it up your nose when you get a nosebleed? No, you should not do that. Don't do anything you heard in the stream. Don't go mellifying your great grandpa Joe because you thought that would give you a youthful appearance. Poor guy. Yeah, this stuff was not very useful, as you probably knew. You probably didn't need to hear me tell you that, but not very useful, not very potent, not very effective, and not very safe, neither, is probably a good assumption to make about corpse medicine. But it is very fun to talk about. It was a lot of fun to hang out this stream, talk about all this crazy stuff going on back in those days. And yeah, so it made for a really good, fun, entertaining stream. The crazy things that different cultures used to do. Corpse medicine, definitely by far one of the craziest. But that does it for me. That makes it about a 2 hour and 5-minute stream. So pretty good. Ended right around perfect time. Tomorrow, I'll see you guys tomorrow then for Wildlife Wednesdays. And like I was telling Adamant here, Wildlife Wednesdays tomorrow, we will cover carnivorous plants. So I got a whole list of some of the coolest plants, how they work, how they actually digest these different bugs that they eat, how different traps work, a lot of different videos on these plants and how they seeing them in action. So if you are a wildlife lover and you like seeing different crazy shit that comes out of nature, we will be doing that tomorrow at 7 p.m. I'll be here Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at 7 p.m. and all next week. Every day, weekday at 7 p.m. we try a different topic on this channel. So if you're watching on YouTube and you saw the stream, come on over to Twitch and join us live where we can have a conversation about the things that we're talking about. Because that's always a lot more fun when you got company on a stream. So to everybody who watched tonight, thank you so much for following along with the stream. As always, thank you, Cutie Pie, my one and only greatest fan. And yeah, I will see the rest of you tomorrow. Thank you so much. Talk to you then.